and come onto the slides, if I could just welcome in particular David Fipps, who's joined us from the University of York in Toronto. Some of you will have heard David talk and give an ILAS Grand Challenge lecture in the autumn last year. And we're very grateful for him joining us today, but also helping us with the process we're about to go through. But we're also going to hear from Ceri, Ceri and Theo as part of this. So quite a lot to get to. So I'll try and rattle through a few slides first and then pass on to David. So I've tried this and it worked 5 minutes ago. So let's hope it works again. Yeah, hopefully that's okay. Obviously, knowledge exchange is something that we talk about a lot about at Keele. It's important part of various government agendas, and for various reasons, not least because I have a role as knowledge exchange champion for Research England. I have found myself talking quite a lot about this in recent years, and not least by also doing one of the ILAS Grand Challenge lectures a couple of years ago. Haven't got time to go through a full presentation on this, but I just really want to remind you about what's going on at the national level, just a little bit about Keele's place within that, and then, as I say, briefly introduce the process that we're going to go through over the next few weeks. However you look at knowledge exchange, the key thing for me is that actually it's not necessarily or shouldn't be a third arm of what we do, that we need to fully integrate it into all of the effectively the research and education that we do. And that's not to say in any way, shape or form that all research, for example, needs to have an immediate impact. I'm a very firm believer in the broad research ecosystem, but nevertheless, we owe it to ourselves and indeed to the society we work within to make sure that whatever we do on the research and education agenda, if it has that relevance, that we make sure that that is actually achieved. At a national level, there are basically 4 things that go on around this space, and we've spent a lot of time, like every other university in the country, thinking about impact in the context of REF. And that really, as you know, is largely around impact case studies, so specific examples of things that we've done, but also importantly this time integrated a bit more into the environment statement. So a little bit how we as a university, how we as faculties and schools within that university create the environment in which high quality research impact can be achieved. The Knowledge Exchange Framework just published data for the first time this year, and I'll come back to how we did. This is Research England's really framework in which they are trying to give us data that we can again evaluate our performance in a fairly controlled way. So not one that actually leads to too many league tables, and I think they've managed to achieve that in a remarkable way, but genuinely one in which we have data that is produced in a consistent way that actually then can be used to help us get better. Our overall activity feeds into KE Hive plans that we've been producing for HEFC and Research England for a while in relation to us getting some funding for them, the Hive funding. Again, I'll come back to that. And then the thing that was launched as a process earlier in the year that I've been taking a national leadership role on is the KE Concordat. And again, importantly, that is designed to help us get better, not necessarily or not even at all to automatically give us something where we're comparing ourselves with others, at least only in that sense of can we pick up good practice in order to move ourselves on. In terms of the knowledge exchange framework results that came out, again, I'm not going to go through this in any detail, but 7 different categories in which we were compared primarily with groups of universities that were not dissimilar to us in terms of our level of research activity. but also an element of overall comparison. So the size of these pies or slices in the pie give us an indication of where we sit. And again, not time for too much detail, but it really did show, as we knew, that we perform very, very well indeed in terms of what we do at a regional level in terms of local growth and regeneration. I think, to be honest, we were a little bit surprised that we came out quite as well in terms of research partnerships, but that's a good place to be. Pretty good around the skills and the other things, not quite as good around IP. I think the one that surprised us a little bit in the negative sense was around working with businesses, and I think we still don't quite understand how that data appeared as it is, because in fact when we look at it, we feel that we're working with as many businesses as universities that seem to do much better in this criteria. But nevertheless, a good overall picture, a good solid, in fact I would argue good response for Keele and a position for Keele, but some indicators of things that we need to move on. One measure of how well we're doing with some of these things is actually to see how much money we get from Research England on the basis of some of this activity. So the Higher Education Innovation Fund is based on a formula, and so your performance, sometimes in the last year, sometimes averaged over a little bit longer, is then fed into a number cruncher, and we are allocated money on the basis of that. And you can see that over the last 6 or 7 years, we've grown from an income from that of less than $500,000, with an anticipated 1.6 million coming in for that on the basis of next year. That curve could have been steeper, but in most of the years, Research England have capped any increase of funding to just 10% of what it was, basically 110% of the previous year. There was one year where it was a bit higher than that, so we could have accelerated quicker, but nevertheless, that shows how we've been going up basically at the Research England maximum allowable increase year on year for the last few years. So we're clearly doing something right, at least if that's judged by the calculations that they do at Research England. So we do have to produce some plans for Research England around that height, and we have in fact just submitted more recently some of our outline plans that we will take forward. It's a fairly minimalist process for that, and in fact it is currently up for review by Research England, so that may well change, or it may well bring some of these different elements all together into one consistent evaluation, and we will start to be consulted on that sort of thing in the next few months. So as part of that, though, going beyond that minimalist, we have had a KE strategy, and we are translating that into plans. And part of the process that we are working through now is actually to look at that in a little bit more detail, literally over the next few weeks. And I would ask you to have a look at some of this over the next few weeks to give your feedback, because it's important that we have it. It's not a static document, so if we miss a deadline, then actually we'll keep on working through it. But nevertheless, it's good to have an opportunity just to reflect on what we are good at and what we want to do. Within that, you will see that the objectives that are emerging and are in there are things that we talk about quite a lot at Keele, and I think there will hopefully be very little in here that actually will be a surprise to you. And you will have talked about them at school level, at faculty level, in the context of the KLE Deals, or in the context of some of the big research projects around things like SEND. So again, I'm not going to go through those, but hopefully you recognize different elements of that, and we can talk about them in more detail in the questions if you want. Taking those high-level objectives into specific projects, then again, you will see them here as I've just said, in the context of some of the projects we already have, or the centres we have, or the institutes we have, and as I said, the Keele deals that we've highlighted over the last few years, which are in particular important in relation to our relationships with the local communities and local organisations. Just to remind you that why we're doing this, I said right at the beginning, in terms of an important integral part of our education and research activity should be that ensuring that we benefit from working with others, but that also we make sure that others benefit from what we do. And that's at the heart of many university missions. Ours is included here as one of the 5 that I've listed. I won't go through which is which, but there's an Oxbridge University here, there's a Post 92, there's a Russell Group, and there's a Keele, and actually fundamentally they all have a very similar message. We want to be brilliant at research and education, and we want to make sure that all of that has an impact where we want it to be. So making sure that that improves for everybody has been the basis of this knowledge exchange Concordat that is now developed and launched at national level. That, I won't go into the full politics of it, but that largely arose out of a view in Whitehall, a view in parts of the city, and views of parts of society, that actually this is something that universities are pretty awful at. And that, you know, policymakers are pretty unconvinced that we do this in an effective way. And in particular, in relation to technology transfer, you will have all heard the stories about how we're good as a country at doing research, but we're poor at translating that into anything that has any value to society. Now, fundamentally, that is actually untrue. And there are various reports to show that actually as a country, we are as good as everybody else. That is a very hard thing to do, and that we can't all be MIT and Stanford, but that actually what we do in the UK is pretty good. So there's a political incentive for us to all make sure that we keep on top of that story, and we really tell the story. But as part of that story, it's important that really we do reflect on how good we are at doing this, and whether we support our staff and our students to carry out KE, that we have clarity in terms of what we expect within the university and outside, and that we have some indicators of how well we're doing and what we do to support it. So the Knowledge Exchange Concordat is a process that actually will allow us to do that. And fundamentally, what this involves is that a process of self-evaluation and then a production of an action plan that addresses those areas where we ourselves have decided that we need to do a bit better. Those action plans and those self-evaluations this year will be then commented on by a national group of evaluators who will give us that feedback confidentially. And that is a feature of the first development year of the Concordat, that it really is an opportunity for us to test the system, to see how it works, to actually get that feedback. And ultimately, the feedback then is designed to give us that effectively impartial advice, to actually help us lodge what we do in the context potentially of good practice in other places, to help us on that journey to develop the various elements that are going to be important, and then to give us that basis that we will then subsequently go back and check our progress in the following years. I can honestly say it genuinely is a development year. It genuinely is trying to be responsive. It will, for example, also, I think, feed into the knowledge exchange framework, which is also going to go through a review, where I think there's a recognition that not all of the metrics are picking up all the sorts of KE that are done around the country. And I'm sure at Keele, and some of you that are on this call will perhaps be wondering how what you do fits into those metrics. And there is a real desire to try and make sure that it adapts and changes in order to pick some of those things up. So we will be going through that self-evaluation in the next few weeks. There will be some workshops happening, and this is one of the things that David has helped us to do, because we do think it is important that we do get that external perspective, that we're not just patting ourselves on the back, or on the other hand, ripping ourselves apart in that self-evaluation process. So as I say, we will need your views, and you will be getting some messages asking specifically for it around the different criteria that are the principles that are in the Concordat. So I would ask you to actually help with that and help us identify the strengths that we can push even harder, but also importantly the gaps that we need to do better at. So that's where we're going. As I say, David will be helping us with some workshops over the next few weeks and months in order to make sure that we get this organized. So at that, I'm now going to actually pass over to David. David, as I said, is from York University in Toronto. He's received numerous honours and awards, including from the Canadian Association for Research Administrators, the Institute for Knowledge Mobilization, the International Network of Research Management Societies, and the EU-based Knowledge Economy Network. In fact, he received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his work in knowledge mobilization, and was named as the most influential knowledge mobilizer in Canada. He sits on the knowledge mobilization committees around the world, and is network director for Research Impact Canada. So clearly David has an awful lot of experience that we can learn from. So as I turn off my slides, can I welcome you again, David? Thank you for coming today and for offering to help us with the process we're about to go through, and very happy to hand over to you for your thoughts on this at the moment.
Great, thank you very much, Trevor. I just want to check you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for this invitation. As Trevor said, I'm joining you today from Toronto, which is on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. And it's a pleasure to be beaming virtually into Keele, which is interesting because when this first invitation to the grand lecture, the grand challenges last year came in, the address of York University is on Keele Street in Toronto. And I saw Keele University, and I was wondering why my university was inviting me to give a Grand Challenge lecture. Nonetheless, it was wonderful last year. It's been a pleasure working with you up till now. I look forward to some future engagement as we've got planned. But I'm just going to take a little bit to go through and talk to you about Machiavelli and Dr. Seuss and how we learned all we need to know about impact from the two of them. This will be to introduce some lessons learned or lessons learning from our work actively investing in knowledge exchange since 2003. And so informed by Machiavelli, from Dr. Seuss, with an institutional partner, Daniele Zanotti, the CEO of United Way of Greater Toronto. And the United Way is an umbrella organization that raises funds for community social service agencies, but is also a builder of civic muscle and civic leadership within cities in Toronto, across Canada and North America. And Daniele actually authored much of this presentation many years ago, and it is my pleasure to take a lead from him. And so just going through quickly, I am not going to read the Italian. My Italian is not good, but I will tell you the translation of this from Machiavelli is that I will conclude then that it is necessary for the prince to have the people as friends. And the lesson for this, for knowledge exchanges, don't do siloed research. Research partnerships must be broad. Most importantly, engage the people impacted by the outcome. And so it's very important that we not only set up ways to listen to people with lived experience, to community, to industry, to government, as we plan our knowledge exchange activities. And Mobilizing Minds is a project that has ended, but York was a partner with about 6 universities, a few dozen community mental health organizations, but importantly, young adults with lived experience of mental health challenges were part of all stages of the program on the governing committee, and were part of the actual production of what we ended up doing, which was a mental health backpack. And it was an online resource tool, and you could unpack different parts of the backpack to get different mental health solutions. And that design, the information was informed by knowledge synthesis by the academics, but the backpack was designed by the young adults. And so engage the people impacted by the outcome. And so all we could do was sit, and we did not like it, not one little bit. And then something went bump. How that bump made us jump. Thank you, Dr. Seuss. The lesson here is to enter all partnerships with an initial plan, a willingness to change because something will go bump. And when it goes bump, be present, exhibit full commitment and engagement. And if you're not ready for that, don't go into this partnership. And I can illustrate this with Research Impact Canada, which is now a network of 21 universities, including the University of Brighton. So we do welcome international members. Hint for that, Trevor. And when we were many years ago, just 6 universities, the 6 universities came together, and the 5 of them had to sit down, York down, and make us go bump, because York was running off well out and ahead of the other universities, speaking on behalf of the universities. Much of the content on the Research Impact Canada website was York. And they said, York, you got to come back and meet us where we are. Stop running out in front. And so we worked through that, and we created different governance structures. And now we're very pleased to say those 6 universities are still with us. Those 5 other universities are still with us as we have grown to 21. But it's important to listen to the bump, don't deny the bump, and sit and be fully committed to engage. Also from Dr. Seuss is, but our fish said, no, no, make that cat go away. Now, have no fear, said the cat. The lesson here is to engage, especially engage the grumpy fish. Talk to the naysayers, the critics, the outsiders. The collaborative is a lovely story. Many years ago, I was giving a talk at the Canadian Federation of Humanities and Social Sciences, and I got up, and literally within 2 minutes, Sandra Lapointe from McMaster University, who was the president of the Canadian Philosophy Association. She's a philosopher who studies a 17th century French philosopher. And she literally stood up. I was just introducing myself, and she called me to task, used some words that I'm not going to say right now. And she says, I don't have to make impact. I don't have to engage. This is my type of work. Why are you making me do this? And, and so there was a bump as well, a cranky fish here. And so we got through that. I made my presentation. Well, 8 months later, I'm at another conference, again for social science humanities, and I'm at a booth. Research Impact Canada has a booth, and I can't leave the booth, and I see her like stomping down the aisle. I can't get away, and I thought, oh gosh, here comes Sandra again. She comes up to me and she said, David, and she wasn't grumpy this time, not at all. She said, David, you pissed me off so much. I went out and did it. She got $250,000 from the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council of Canada, and she created the collaborative, which is a platform for knowledge brokering with philosophy professors and high school classes and in philosophy. So if you ever want to talk to a philosophy professor, you can use the collaborative as a platform. Never underestimate the power of a pissed off scholarly president, right? So it was wonderful, but we engaged the fish. And then my second last lesson again comes from Machiavelli. Those who come only with good fortune may with little effort arrive, but must with huge effort remain and sustain. All good things take time and hard work. If it comes too easy, it's likely not worth it. And this is the experience. We have a wonderful relationship now with the Future Skills Center. This is a $350 million investment by the federal government of Canada to build Canada's competitiveness with basic and future skills. The Future Skills Center has retained the Research Impact Canada to deliver knowledge mobilization services to the projects that they invest in. It is wonderful now. We are in year 4. Yes, we're in year 4. Year 1 was, we didn't actually sign the agreement in year 1 until 5 days after year 1 had ended. That was amusing. We then had to report on year 2, and we literally had 14, we submitted a report for year 2 activities, and we had to revise it 14 times because they kept giving us different formats of the review. And it wasn't their fault, because I'm sure the government was giving them these different formats. So it was a lot of effort to get to a very good place where we are right now, but it was good effort to, and it is very much worth it, delivering knowledge mobilization services in such a critical piece for Canada. And then my last lesson is from Dr. Seuss from Cat in the Hat. I have some good friends, I can show them to you. I call them thing 1 and thing 2. And the lesson here is more partners the better, for sure, but you need to have commitment to the shared vision. All must come to the table. But here's the thing for Keele. Build corporate relationships deeper than the strength of one-on-one. Individual researchers and community agencies, government agencies, or industry, they will come and go, and those are very important relationships. But if Keele can create institutional relationships with industry associations, with something like the United Way of Greater Toronto, where you've got an overarching partnership with institution to institution, under which researcher and agency, researcher and company, researcher and local or national government partnerships can sit nested and supported. So build corporate relationships deeper than the strength of one-on-one. I don't, that is the end. I am happy to elaborate more on these, but I do think, Trevor, it's important that we give Keele researchers a chance to shine as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, David. As said, we'll have some time at the end for any questions that anybody has for you. So we have now got a chance to do exactly as you've just said. Theo, Zoe, and then Ceri. I think give a little short indication of their experience in this space. And Theo, I think we're going to start with you.
Hi, thank you. Let me just project my slides. Right, can you see my slides?
We can.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks for this opportunity to speak about my experience at Keele. I'm Theo Kyriacou. I'm a senior lecturer at the School of Computing and Mathematics at Keele. So my experience comes from involvement in several CRIS projects and Santander internships, and more recently a great success with a KTP with Bentley Motors. I will mostly talk about my experience with the KTP, but I don't want to downplay the my involvement with the smaller projects, the CRIS projects, and the Santander internships. Those were very valuable in teaching me a lot of things about interacting with businesses and problems in the real world, and I value them very much. And I put some names there. Great thanks to many colleagues who are making this possible and supporting me in this. And these were the successes that I mentioned. There have been attempts that fell through, and I don't want to mention those, and those are part of my experience, a very valuable part as well. I have at least 3 attempts that fell through to get KTPs going. The reasons for those, for the failing of those, were the changes of business. The solution was found, perhaps due to my intervention, but a solution was realized at some point. The cost of the KTP appeared too high to the company. The commitment or the time it would take was seemingly too long for the company. But I value the experience because that gave me the chance to spend a few days with the companies looking at real world problems, and that was very valuable for me. It was worth the effort for that learning experience. So I'm not an expert, but perhaps a few things to take home, and more than happy to discuss further, because in 5 minutes there's no chance I can describe my whole experience here. And I want to take you through the timeline of the Bentley KTP in particular. So it all started with a phone call to speak about the problem, and the phone call wasn't actually about them to talk about their problem. It was about them asking whether they could get a CV for one of our graduates that went and worked for them, and they said, by the way, we have this problem, can you help? And yeah, I said, can I see some data straight away? And I'm showing a graph of my hope about whether something would come out of this there for you to look at the same time. So they said, yeah, I can send you some data, but we need to make sure that, nothing, of our company secrets leaks, and can you sign a non-disclosure agreement? So I said, yeah, I'll ask my institution and get back to you. And then the hope started sort of dropping, because that non-disclosure agreement took about a month to sign, and I thought I lost them probably. So it went down, and after when the non-disclosure agreement was signed, eventually I got on the phone and I said, are you still interested about this? And I was thinking, there's no way they would be still there or interested. And they said, oh yeah, we are, and let's arrange a meeting. So there was a telephonic meeting arranged. They started describing the problem, and it was kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of people on the phone, and I said, I need to come there. Can I come there and see the problem? Can I bring my laptop and crunch some data for you and see what the problem is face to face? And they said yes. So hope started going up. I visited their headquarters in Crewe. There was a meeting arranged. It was a fantastic meeting, great impressions from both sides. The problem was clear, and that was interesting to me, and we could see a solution. We started discussing a solution, and towards the end of that meeting, they said, right, well, how do we pay you, and how long will this take? And it took me by surprise. I said, yeah, there's this possibility. There's a PhD student. There's consultancy fees you can pay. There's the KTP. I said that's a great thing, but I didn't know many details about that to mention figures and things. So I said I'll go back to my institution and come back to you with some numbers, and that's what I did. And there was another meeting arranged, and Kezia came with me and explained everything about the KTP, and things were looking good. There's a slight dip up there because when you give the figure, you don't know how the company will take it. I mean, will this sound too much for them? And you don't know. So a few days passed, and I inquired about this. I mean, did this sound okay to you? Shall we go ahead with the KTP? And an email came back, and they said, well, let's solve this problem, they said, because it's urgent that we solve this problem, and then we can go on a KTP with something else a bit later. We have another problem coming along. And it was a cold morning. It became colder that moment for me. By the way, look at the timeline. This is 2017 it started, okay? And Bentley wanted a solution a few months before 2017, okay? So I said, I'm not giving up, because there's still an open door here. They still want to solve the problem. So I'll persevere and see where this leads. And I arranged for the company representatives to come to Keele in that case, because I said I have more computing power here, and I can deal with this problem for you, and I can show you, better, how we can go about solving it. So they brought their data. We spent the whole day, lots of coffee, and I made them realize that this problem isn't something we can solve in a few days, weeks. We need a couple of years. So a KTP does make sense. My hopes were still low, though, because it weren't the people who could make the decision, but they could take the problem, they could take this further and ask whether we could. So things shot up a few days later when I got a phone call to say that, yes, they took it to their executive board, and there was an agreement to go ahead with a KTP, and they were very interested, and they were willing to spend not 2 years, but 3 years, and they couldn't wait. And then after that, things took off, and I couldn't keep up with the pace, to be honest with you. We went through drafts and things for a KTP, submitted it in no time, and got it in the end. And I knew we would get it, because the success rate for a KTP is 90%. Well, it was 90%, slightly lower now, but very high still. So we're close to the end of that KTP now. It's a very successful one. It's one that I'm sure will bring very, very interesting case studies for our next ref, but the company is absolutely thrilled. There's already outputs coming out of it. So I couldn't say, I have the best words to say about how the collaboration is going. So this is my last slide. I mean, my 2 pennies worth, I guess. my lesson is that to take any and every opportunity available to me to meet with companies and businesses and hear their problems. I would always offer to go to them and hear their problem rather than ask them to come to me. The bridge between the problem and the solution is difficult. And there's no recipe for it. I think it just comes out in conversation that starts casually. And I've learned a lot of things of how to initially engage. And it's no use starting to talk about the tools that I use and how successful they are and machine learning algorithms. There's no use doing that. And when you hear the problem, it's no use jumping up with and offering solutions straight away. Let the person speak and say what the problem is and understand that it's a complex problem and appreciate that. Lots to say there anyway, but I won't carry on. I learned to have confidence in my ability. I didn't have it in the beginning. I was going to the company thinking, do I really have to offer something to them? I mean, this is a company that turns over billions every year. Do I really? It turns out that I could, yes. And don't give up when the door is still open. Keep persevering. Good things will come out. Even the experience is a good thing. There was never a time when not just this company, but any company didn't believe that we could help. And my mentality now is, and I say it explicitly to the companies I meet, that if there is a solution, we will find it. Thank you.
Theo, that was fantastic. Thank you. I think hearing your experience of that process will be hugely invaluable to all of us who have heard it. And I must admit, the idea of a hope graph, I think, is one that will stick with me. I'm not sure whether it'll cheer me up every morning or depress me, but nevertheless, I think it's a fantastic concept. So again, hopefully we'll be able to come back if anyone's got any specific questions afterwards, but we'll move now to Zoe to give your perspectives.
Super, thank you very much. So I can just check that you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Super. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about some of the partnership work that we've been involved in, really around sustainable solutions. So I call myself nowadays a sustainability scientist, and sustainability scientists are really sort of focused on solutions-focused research. And sustainable solutions absolutely require multiple partnerships. They require bringing together different actors, bringing together different perspectives in order to try and ensure that we develop solutions that actually work and that don't inadvertently create more problems. And this is sort of really reflected in how we need to, for example, look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which are sort of being deconstructed there, because it's really not about focusing on sort of individual challenges, but how these different challenges interact in order for us to create really effective solutions and a better world. So I'm just going to talk about some of the wide range of sort of knowledge exchange and partnership research, which really sort of sits within the Institute of Sustainable Futures at Keele and is reflected sort of in the mission statement and aims of the ISF. So on the one hand, we have the High Deploy project, which is a gas industry-led consortium, which has used the Keele campus to blend hydrogen in the gas network. But critically, Keele has also added a social science element of research to this that wouldn't have been part of the project otherwise. So we as researchers have brought this different perspective to the technical team, and in return, they've given us access to industry and policy makers that actually it's harder to make as an individual researcher. Another project that we have going on is work with all 10 councils within Staffordshire, including the county council, in order to support them in their climate actions. And this came about because of Keele's reputation in sustainability and a few different local councils sort of saying, can you help us address our climate emergency work? And that's sort of developing into a programme of actually working collaboratively with all of the councils to help them work together and working in partnership with the Centre for Alternative Technology. But actually the the project that I want to focus on most is this Zero Carbon Rougely project. So this is Innovate UK funded. It's led by ENGIE, so multinational sort of service provider, and it has a really eclectic range of partners in the consortium, from the new Vic Theatre through to energy market software developers. So that's the range of different sort of partners there. The project itself is around developing the design for a town scale smart local energy system for the town of Rougely, and that's at the top of the slide. You can see the cooling towers from the previous coal-fired power station collapsing, and that's really sort of symbolic of the transformation that ENGIE is really wanting to see for this town. Where do we come into it? Well, this came about as a starting point through really the Smart Energy Network Demonstrator project, and some conversations which were happening between ENGIE and our estates people at Keele, people like Ash Hume, who invited a number of us as academics in to just have a conversation with ENGIE about the sorts of work that we did and how we could possibly work together. This developed into, I think, ENGIE approaching us around an Innovate UK bid they were interested in putting together, and Anne Pittard was very critical to this in terms of bringing Keele to the fore, saying that we could deliver the user-centric design focus of this project, where the user is absolutely the sort of centre of the design that is being sort of created as we speak, but also critically bringing in our existing partnerships with the new Vic Theatre as well. So from those sort of starts, we got the funding, and we find ourselves in a position where, our job at Keele is actually working between the consortium and the community. And that's partly helping the consortium understand the community, helping to translate insights from the community to the software developers and designers, but also translating back from the consortium into the community as well. So really, we're bringing quite a different area of sort of specialism into this partnership, and working with the new Vic to sort of really bring their cultural animation approaches from what originally we'd been hoping to be was face-to-face, but actually into an online sort of format. So I suppose where I would like to finish is just sort of looking at some of the benefits that I've seen as someone relatively new to working in this field in the past sort of 2 or 3 years. You can see real benefits to the project, to the community, in terms of really ensuring designs are based around user needs and wants, that the community is engaged, which will then help actually implement the solutions being designed, creating real genuine change. And actually, it's also created other activity catalysed within the community. We also see some shifts in practice and funding paradigms from the work that we're doing around user-centric design. We have other partners who are changing the way that they're thinking about doing work in the future on other projects. We're really working and we're seeing an increased appreciation of the value of social science research by partners who tend to view things from a technical lens. And we're really building Keele's reputation for innovative user-centric design methodologies with the funders, particularly in this net zero space. And in terms of sort of benefits to Keele, in terms of research and knowledge exchange, I would say, we're seeing further funding opportunities through those enhanced networks. It's also really inputting into our teaching and our staff development. And of course, we're seeing really enhanced impact because of the other connections that our partners bring. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So I think a good example, I think, of where universities really can be central. There aren't many other types of organisations that can bring such multidisciplinary consortia to address the problems that people have. So clearly one of the big roles that we have to play. So thank you for that. And then third, but by no means least, Ceri.
Okay, thank you. Just share my screen. So is that working now?
It seems to be stuck on slide number 2.
Okay, sorry.
That's it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, slide number 2 is fine. So I do something quite different from the examples we've already seen so far, in that I essentially make art with people. I work on literary geographies, place writing, and geohumanities, which, for those of you less familiar with the term, as its name suggests, brings together geography and humanities, and also increasingly arts practices as well as approaches. And I'm a long-standing member of the Montreal-based research group, La Traversée. And around 5 years ago, I began adapting some of the methods and approaches learned from colleagues like Rachel Bouvet in relation to geopoetics, which I'm defining here rather simplistically as site-responsive creative practices. So in November 2016, I led a geopoetics workshop at Silverdale Country Park to mark the 50th anniversary of the Aberfan disaster. For those of you who are not sure what the Aberfan disaster was, that was when a spoil tip, a coal spoil tip, collapsed on Pantglas Junior School in the South Wales village, killing most of the pupils and teachers inside. I have a personal connection, many colleagues will know I have a personal connection to the disaster, in that my aunt, Myra Morgan, was one of the few surviving teachers, and indeed she's the only remaining living survivor amongst the staff of the disaster. Like many country parks, Silverdale is a site of a former coal mine, so it was a perfect venue for this workshop. And in November 2016, a small group of us, comprised of some faculty, undergraduates, postgraduates, an archivist, parish councillors from Silverdale, a former miner who'd worked at Silverdale, and his wife, had an hour at the site, and we just walked and talked and carried out some informal interviews as we went along. Afterwards, some of us wrote texts inspired by the experience, and these, included poems, short stories, and a song, and along with some photographs and extracts from the informal interviews. These were exhibited at Silverdale Community Library in the autumn of 2017, and a launch event featuring readings and the performance of the song by my very talented friend and colleague Nick Bentley was attended by colleagues from Keele, so staff and students from Keele, but also Silverdale villagers, former miners, and so on. The following year then, we were very lucky in that we had an opportunity to develop this work, thanks to my colleague and friend Ben Anderson, as a social and environmental historian, who fostered an introduction to the immersive and participatory company Vstoke to think about developing a show to coincide with Keele's hosting of the Social History Conference. What Vstoke did was stitch together texts from Memories of Mining, so the creative text and the song, with additionally specially composed music and dance sequences. They also did a call out for participants. You can see some of us rehearsing in some of these photographs. And we eventually did 5 rehearsals with a range of participants aged from 14, was the youngest, we had one child, a 14-year-old, up to the mid-70s, from a range of backgrounds, some of whom had performed with Vstoke before, some of whom had families, were from families with mining connections, some of whom just fancied doing something a bit different, and along with a very small number of professional singers and dancers, we performed the show to a full house at Keele Chapel. And there's just some of the responses to the show. So good to be reminded of the terrible tragedy of Aberfan and the perils of an industry that is perhaps prone to romanticisation, and seems moved me and caused me to reflect in a way I never have done before about mining, work, loss, community and love. So quite different work. It's not problem solving, it's not really solution led in the sense that perhaps some of the discussions we've had so far have been about, but it's about, I seek to make kind of creative conviviality, or moments of creative conviviality, or moments of convivial creativity with other people, and the ripple effect from that can be quite significant. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Ceri. Again, I think emphasising very clearly that it's not just about working with organisations, but that the communities around us actually are both a rich source of input into us, but also communities that hopefully we can have some impact on. So, Ceri, if you could.
Sorry, I just can't work out how to do it. It looks different from usual. I don't know why this is not.
Okay, I've got a button here that says I can take control.
Okay, just take it off for me, please. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, gone. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, a fantastic set of projects which hopefully also linked across back into some of the things that David highlighted. We have got just under 10 minutes left in the timetabled session. So if anyone has got any particular comments or questions for any of our speakers today, then please do put your hand up, and I will come to you and ask you to speak. Everybody's been very shy by the looks of it. No, Chrisia.
So thank you very much. Fantastic presentations, and particularly for David, very inspirational messages. And so I'm Krisha Jedgets. I'm for Keele in the Faculty of Health, the director of an Impact Accelerator unit. I've been an NIHR Knowledge Mobilisation Research Professor, and for NICE I'm an implementation advisor to their Fellows and Scholars programme. So I guess you can gather what my question will be. It seems to be that we need to use different languages for different audiences and different ways of communicating. And very often we get hung up about, you know, what is it? You know, we often end up having to explain what it is when we're talking to different audiences. So is that the same sort of internationally, or is it quite, you know, clear that the terminology is quite well accepted? Because you clearly talk very seamlessly between the different approaches. So and I think that the new challenge for us, particularly in health, is now we've got the knowledge exchange framework. So again, we've got a new hat to sort of work out how does that fit, and where can we align our direction of travel to deliver for that as well.
There we go. Thank you so much, Chrisia. It's lovely to meet you. The language is not our friend on this. In Canada, we have 2 official languages and many Indigenous languages that are coming up. So I'm comfortable being in a multilingual environment, and we do need to switch our language. In Canada, if you're in the social sciences, you use knowledge mobilization. If you're in the health sciences, you use knowledge translation. So even within Canada, we don't have a single term. The term that I like for this is what the Americans use coming out of the National Science Foundation, and it's called broader impacts. And I really like that. We acknowledge the impacts on scholarship. That's absolutely fundamental to our work. But the broader impacts could be impacts on society, on the economy, on environment, on culture, on health, for example. So I like that concept of broader impacts. But no, the language is not our friend. And the reason I run a knowledge mobilization unit is because we were heavily weighted in the social sciences. If I was in a medical faculty, I'd be running a knowledge translation unit. If I could rebrand, I would run a broader impacts unit.
It's fascinating. A small anecdote from the development of the Concordat. We talked a lot as to whether we should use the term knowledge exchange, and there was a lot of discussion around collaboration, around co-production, and in the end, basically, we just bottled it and kept it at knowledge exchange. But very definitely wanting the exchange word in there rather than transfer. That actually this is more of a partnership approach in the vast majority of cases, and important that we recognise that. Derek.
Hello, thank you so much for your inspiring presentation, David, and the other presenters. I've learned a great deal. I suppose my question is around lived experience, because we talked a lot about corporate engagement, etc., especially David in your presentation. And just building on Kezia's question, I think is around the shared language of participation rather than a multilingual situation where you could have people with very different levels of experience and different levels of educational attainment, for instance. So how do you build the capacity? How do you build trust? How do you engage deeper into disadvantaged communities to, especially getting beyond the usual noisy, more confident usual suspects? How do we do that, and how do we develop a shared language of participation in these contexts?
It's very important. Thank you, Derek. I've just put a link in the chat to a blog that I wrote that it doesn't address exactly what you're saying, but it's about how to provide voice to those, to the traditionally marginalized voices. I did it in the context, I wrote this piece in the context of seeing patients and public reviewers in grant review. And the way that we do it is hey, patient and public reviewers, let's build your capacity, let's train you, and then let's stick you at a table of a bunch of academics who hold all the power at that table, right? And my suggestion is, at least in peer review, is we separate those two, and I've given 3 examples of how to think about it. It is really important, I like to say, and it's not my words, nothing about us without us. And so how do we, and I think it's Ceri, I think, who said, put the user at the center of the design. And so I think, and we've got 2 minutes left. Derek, I love the question. I could go down a rabbit hole on this one, but it's really important. What we need to do is shift power, and a way that universities are really good at holding on to power is we put your name, you community partner name on our grant, and then we hold the money. Right? How do we put the community partner as a co-applicant so we can transfer some money to the community partner so they can hold some power in the relationship, right? And that's coming from Canadian granting rules. It's possible, but we have to reimagine moving our partners from partner roles into co-applicant roles.
Yeah, and I think some potentially interesting opportunities for us in this country, David, as well, because the way that our current government has seen what they term the levelling up agenda, which we can all argue as to whether we believe on the full commitment and how that will work. But nevertheless, I think we will see more funding that is coming through community and certainly local authority routes rather than standard research routes. And as a university, that is something that we've got to learn to adapt to, because it's not what we've been used to in the past.
And what does this, I'll just quickly say, also as the health charities. Health charities have the patient and lived experience at the core of what they do.
Indeed, indeed. So, no one else putting their hand up, but it is literally just clicked over to 1 o'clock on my computer. So, can I thank once again David, Theo, Zoe, Ceri, for your fantastic contributions. I think it's been a very, very rich hour. I think wonderful to hear an international perspective, but also I think also emphasising how we do some pretty good stuff at Keele, lots to build on, lots of experience to build on, and clearly one of the things that we're going to be aiming to do is actually to have more opportunities to bring these sorts of experiences together, because I think as Theo emphasised, some of these journeys are not straightforward. They're not the sort of experiences we're used to, and if we've got other people to hold our hands as we're going through them, then the success rate will go up enormously. So thank you to the four of you. Thank you for everybody else for joining us. There are more sessions through next week in the Impact Festival, and so I'd encourage you to engage with those and also the workshops that we've got lined up around the Concordat. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a good weekend when it comes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.